Okay, so we're gonna make that elephant. I just have some like spare fondant here. You can just see the photo. So this little guy's really, really easy to make. Don't need a lot. I'm not gonna need all of this. I mean, you can make it with like this amount of fondant if you want. But you can make him also really little. He's a very simple little guy to do. So what I'm gonna do is take a chunk for his body. You wanna put pressure when you're rolling with the fondant. It kind of helps really make it into a cohesive ball. Then just kind of turn it slightly conical, like in a cone shape. So it'd be, you're rolling with your hands almost kind of open-ish, more closed at the bottom. So then you've got kind of this cone-ish shape. It's gonna squish down, which is totally fine. So I'm gonna do it just like that way so you can sort of see it better. The next, we're gonna go ahead and do his arms and legs. I haven't made this guy in years. I made this, oh, let's see, I had to pull up my personal Facebook to find the original photo. Back in 2012, so 11 years ago I made this one. I was just messing around one day and thought it would be fun to make some kind of a figurine, and ended up making a little elephant. Just kind of ended up like that. It wasn't really intended. So I'm going to be using two different tools. You do not need anything fancy. You really don't for this. I just have these, so I'm going to be using them. So I have an X-Acto knife. You can just use a paring knife or whatever knife you have on hand. And then I'm using what's called the Dresden tool. Honestly, you can just use the blunt side of a knife, like of a paring knife or whatever, to make the marks you want. Absolutely not necessary, but if you have something like this, you might as well use it, right? So I'm gonna cut this into quarters as evenly as I can. I'm gonna shape his arms. Again, kind of starting that conical when it's little. It's easier to kind of do it more like this than in the big hand sometimes. I'm creating a whole funky shape. Or rolling it on the table also works. So for this one, you really want to kind of press it against the surface. So that's going to give you that flat elephant foot look. And give it a little bit of a roll. And then you're just going to do that 3 more times. And I do like to kind of give the fondant a massage, especially if it's just been sitting there, because the surface does get a little dry pretty quick. And I'm just going to kind of try to compare them, make sure I'm doing them relatively even in their size and shape. The legs, the bottom legs can be a little bit bigger. So obviously that kind of looks cuter if you've got a larger size and a smaller. I think in the original photo they were the same, but really that's up to you when you make it, if it's going to be large feet and small hands or the same. Okay, that looks about good. Alright, and then the other one. I'm going to cut off just a little bit because I have a lot on this particular one. That looks good. So, to attach them, you're going to be using water, and I forgot that, so we're going to do a quick jump cut to once I have some water. Okay, so I have some water in my little tiny mug and a paintbrush. Honestly, you could use your finger and then just dry your finger really well after applying the water. You could use a basting brush just really carefully, like the corner of it. You could even use like a palette knife or just something to help you get a little bit of water on to the side, but a brush is great. Just make sure if you've used it for like acrylic paints or oil paints or something, you're not using that just because that's not food safe. Use something that hasn't been used before, like a new brush. So I'm going to do this sideways. Normally I'd do it standing up like this, which is what you would want to do, but it's the same process if you're putting it on downwards like this or already standing. And honestly, you could totally make it flat like this and then stand it up on the cake. It's really not going to make a huge difference. Yes, there's a little bit of flattening, but it's not going to be all that noticeable in the end. So basically, I'm just going to put some of that water on, and I will take our two biggest feet. Oh, got a little water on my hand. And then you just wrap them around. It's honestly easier sitting up. So from up top, you can see what I'm doing for sitting up. You just kind of press it all the way in so it looks like that. Maybe putting them on is actually better for showing you. So yeah, so then that's those. So it'll look like that when you're looking at it straight ahead. And we're gonna do the same thing with his arms. We're gonna go ahead and just put him on standing up. And again, you're just pressing. Like that to attach them on. If you need to add a little bit of water, you can. I don't have quite enough there. There we go. So then he looks like this. You got your legs on. Now for the head. So I'm going to chop this just a little bit because it's a little tall. Just kind of squish it in just a little bit, but that flatness is totally fine since obviously we're going to be putting the head on top. Now, if you're worried about the stability of your elephant, you can take a toothpick and you can stick it in the center to make sure that head is going to hold on. I'm not going to bother with that just because I'm going to probably squish this guy once I'm done, so I'm not going to waste the toothpick. But next is going to be the head. I got to remember how I did this. That's the challenge. Because I did pull his nose, I believe, from the ball and not attached it on. So I'm just gonna get this. It's a good size. So I'm gonna do for that. I'm rediscovering this as I show you. I'm just gonna kind of pinch and pinch and pinch and pinch and pinch and try not to fold the fondant at all, because then you'll get creases and that's not entirely what you want. So you can kind of, hopefully that was pretty visible. It's a fairly easy thing to do. You just fiddle with it. You can always try a few different times. You don't like how it's looking, just squish it back up, roll it nice and tight, give it another try. I do have a little bit of creasing there, but it is on the side, so it's not too big of a deal. Alright, so we have our head, and so then this is where either the back of the knife or the Dresden tool comes in handy. So this is where we want to make our little marks across his nose. So we got his little nose marks. And then his smile. Again, you can also do that with the back of a knife. You could use it with the end of your paintbrush. A toothpick would also work. A toothpick would work for all of this just fine as well. Hopefully this smile doesn't look scary. All right. Then a little bit of water on top. Honestly, I'm gonna thin out his neck a little bit more and chop it down a little bit more. So now I'm gonna add water. All on there, not too much. And squish his head on. Actually, nope, neck's not thin enough. Thin out the neck, just pinch it, pinch it, pinch it. And then his eyes, so let's put him sideways, there we go. His eyes are gonna be black pen, so we won't put those on yet, we'll make that last. So his ears are the next part. So take like 2 little chunks, try to make sure they're the same size. Now elephant ears are a little bit different shaped, so I'm gonna kind of roll it between my fingers like that to kind of create 2 more knobbed bits. Kind of like a jelly bean. That's kind of the look I'm going for. And you can totally just squish this out with your hands. If your fingers are starting to get sticky, mine actually are a little bit. You can take some cornstarch or even some Crisco. If you have Crisco, that's also an option. That'll just make your fondant kind of shiny and a little bit harder to stick it together with water. So I'd recommend cornstarch mostly for a lot of things. But just a tiny bit. Don't douse it. I just take it from the lid basically because I'm not doing a bunch. That'll dry out your hands enough, and then you're not leaving like a bunch of marks. You can totally press it out with your fingers. Get the look that you want. Press, 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 press. And if you want to do a little notch like mine had, that notch was, I do remember that notch was unintentional. It just ripped, but it did work because elephants sometimes have those notches. So I'm going to actually cut that notch out. And so then this curve, which is going to be a little bit thicker, you're leaving that curve bit a little bit thicker, as you can see. Then you're going to take your water, put it along the edge of that ear, stick it on the side, and then fold it to your heart's content. So that's one ear. I'm gonna, whoop! Yeah, this is where the sideways thing is not gonna work very well. So I'm gonna stick the ears on and then I'll attempt to give a little bit of a close-up for what it's looking like. I'm just gonna make sure it's stuck on real good. Give it some movement. And do that again. And again, the ears don't have to be completely symmetrical. It's elephants, they're definitely not symmetrical. One ear could be a tiny pinch smaller. One ear could be more beaten up than the other. So that's up to you and how you want to do it, as well as if you're doing it by hand, like with your fingers like this, you're more likely to get a lot of variation in shape as well. You totally could use a rolling pin. That is totally possible, but it's not what I really chose to do. So I'm going to put a few more notches in this ear, just 2. And remember, you are doing mirror, because I forget that sometimes. I was looking at it as if this was my completed ear. It's actually this way. So just keep that in mind. I tend to forget that a lot. And then I'll make sure it's matched up for where it's at on the head, so they're in line. And then there we go. So there's our elephant ears. I have a really big elephant ears this time. You can do smaller, you can do bigger, totally up to you. I'm gonna try to give a little bit more a different look to these ears and the movement that I've got. Okay, so then I'm gonna go get my black edible ink really quickly. Okay, so you have two options. There's an edible pen. This one is called Fractal. You can get Wilton ones. They do come with black. That's honestly your easiest option to do, is an edible pen for the eyes. Otherwise, you could use black food coloring. This is black gel food coloring from Americolor. And a paintbrush, like a really small paintbrush, or a toothpick. Toothpick would work actually probably a little bit easier than using a paintbrush. I'm using the edible pen because it's my favorite, but pretty much just the food coloring, you'd put just a small dot, you'd take your toothpick or your toothbrush, just get just a little bit on there and poke where you want your eye, and just, if you want to get it bigger, just work very, very slowly and cautiously so you don't feel like you've ruined it if you're not happy with it. But I'm just going to use my little Fractal pen. I love these pens. They have kind of a soft tip, so you can do kind of calligraphy style work with them. Fabulous, absolutely wonderful. But I'm just going to put his eyes on. Eyes are the hardest part for me because you have to have them match up. Oh my goodness. Okay, it did work. Cool. The lighting was kind of not working there for me, but there we go. So this is one of the little guys. He definitely looks a little bit different than the guy in the picture. It's all kind of depends on the day, depends on the hour. I think his ears are definitely the bit that sticks out the most different from the original. But that's the basic idea. That is pretty much what I did the first time. I'd probably make his ears a little bit smaller, but he is totally giving me Dumbo vibes with the giant ears. But yeah, that's how you make this little guy, and I hope that helps you and that you have an absolute blast making yours.